All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today on Facebook Live. I'm Ashton Day, health educator here at the Boone County Columbia Public Health and Human Services Department. Today we're talking all about the upcoming census and election. A lot has gone on in 2020 already, and I think it's kind of easy to forget there is an election and a census, but they're still really important. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it to Sarah Hum, who's joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Sarah Hum. I work for the City of Columbia. I'm a community relations specialist working in the city manager's office. But one of the special projects that I'm working on is the 2020 census. And so the city and the county have a partnership called Boone County Counts. And our efforts are basically to outreach to the community to help share information about the 2020 census, why it's so important, and how people can participate. And especially now that there have been some changes to the operations due to the pandemic, it's even more important that we make sure that our residents know how they can participate. And so I'm sure we'll share some information about that here coming up.
Yeah, and then also joining us is Brianna Lennon, the county clerk.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Brianna Lennon. I'm the county clerk for Boone County. So our office administers the elections. And the big one that is coming up on June 2nd is our rescheduled April municipal election. So the city council offices, the school board, and any of the questions like bonds are all on this ballot. It would have been voted on in April, but because of the uncertainty of COVID-19 and having enough time to prepare the polling places and make sure that we had enough election judges, the governor moved the election until June. So June is not a new election. It's not an election that is an addition to the April election. It's actually just the rescheduled April election. So it's really important that people get out and vote in it because it's the most local of the elections that we have this year. And so it's really voting on things that are happening in the community. So it's important to make your voice heard. So I appreciate getting into this today so that we can talk about how to make sure that you can vote and all of the different options and safety precautions that we're taking in place for the election.
Yeah, and thank you both for joining. If anyone's watching and has questions, you are more than welcome to leave those in the comments for us, and we will get to that at the end. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the census specifically. So Sarah, when is the deadline to fill out the census?
Sure. So as I just mentioned, the deadline has actually been pushed back. It was originally supposed to be in July, and now it's at the end of October. So they pushed it back for a few reasons. One, because there's a pandemic happening, and so that complicates things. And that's, something that's, you're right, the census is not exactly something people are necessarily thinking about right now, but also because the Census Bureau does in-person activities with part of their count. And so what people normally know is kind of Census Bureau employees coming to their door. That is a thing that they still want to do. And that was supposed to be starting right now. And that obviously isn't happening. So they've pushed back the date of when census responses are due, also so that they can make sure they have time to do those in-person follow-ups. And so that was pushed back until August. And so from August to October, that will take place where if you're someone who hasn't responded to the census yet, either by phone, by mail, or online, a census worker will come to your home to ask you the questions that are on the census form. Now, that's what we know right now. That very well could change depending on what happens with this pandemic. And so, we want our residents to know that we'll keep them informed and updated about what that looks like as the time comes.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's been about 10 years since we filled out a census. So can you remind folks why it's so important to fill out the census?
Sure. So yeah, we only do the census every 10 years. And so if you think about how old you were 10 years ago and how old you will be in 10 years, a lot happens. And, especially when we think about young children, if you have a kiddo who's say 7 right now, this will be the first time they'll be on a census form, but the next time they'll be on a census form is when they're 17 and about to, head on to a new chapter of their life. And so that's a whole childhood. And so it's really important for people to fill out the census, not only as a way to say that, I'm here, I count here, this is where I'm living, this is where my home is, this is where I should be represented. But also there's a lot of funding tied up in the census. And so there are hundreds of billions of dollars allocated by the federal government that goes to really important programs. And in fiscal year 2016, the state of Missouri got $16 billion in federal funding. And that's for things that we all use. So things like schools and hospitals and roads and bridges, but also it goes to programs to help folks who need a little bit of help. So things like SNAP and WIC, school lunch programs, Head Start, mental health programs for veterans, programs for survivors of domestic abuse. I mean, it's across the board of what kinds of programs are funded through census data. And so it's really important to make sure that we have an accurate count for our community, not only so we can see how our population is growing, but also so we can get our share of funding. Because for every person, both adult and child, who aren't counted, we could potentially lose $1,300 per person per year. So that's $13,000 over a 10-year span. And that's significant. But also it's really important for us to fill out the census because we know that businesses use census data when they're looking at where to build a new store or restaurant or where to bring new jobs. And so that can be really good for our economy. And, especially right now when a lot of people are struggling and people have lost their jobs and, people may be more dependent on some social programs and nonprofits for help. We really need to make sure we take the census seriously so that we can say that we have an accurate count and we're getting the funding that we need to help support our community.
How can someone fill out the census?
Sure, it's really easy. It only takes a few minutes and you can do it online or by phone right now. If you had not filled it out online or by phone, you should have gotten a paper form in April. And that's also an option. And again, also the option of someone coming to your house. And really, we want people to fill it out how they feel most comfortable, because we know that some people either don't have internet access or they don't feel comfortable using the internet. But it really only takes a few minutes, no matter how you fill it out. And it's only asking a few questions about each person in your household. And we also want to stress to make sure that you're making sure to fill out for every person in your household. So if you're, say, maybe a grandparent who has custody of a grandchild, don't want you to forget that grandchild. Or if you have roommates, don't forget the roommates. If a friend is renting a room from you, so making sure you're thinking about what your household looks like and counting everyone who's in your household. But yeah, people can go right now to my2020census.gov and fill it out, or they can call. The phone number for English is 844-330-2020. And census is available in 13 different languages. And so if they use that website, they can choose the language they want. They can visit the Census Bureau's website at 2020census.gov to see the phone numbers for the additional languages, or they can go to our website, which is Boone County Counts. So we have a link there to all of the phone numbers with the different languages as well. But it's simple and it's easy and it's important.
Yeah, and we will share that the the URL and phone number info in the comment section of this video as soon as we're published and done. But thank you so much for sharing that information. We're going to move on and talk about the upcoming election. So I know you said it earlier, but when is the rescheduled election?
The rescheduled election is June 2nd. Our polling place hours are the same as they always are, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we still have absentee voting available as well.
Yeah, so can you kind of explain the process for absentee voting, how that works?
Sure. So there's two ways to do absentee voting. You can do it by mail or you can do it in person. In person, you would come to our office, and we're at the corner of 9th and Ash. And you can do that all the way up until 5 p.m. on June 1st. And we'll give you a ballot. You'll fill it out. You will have to state the reason why you are choosing to vote absentee. But the process works a lot like a regular election day if you come in person, because we hand you the ballot and you put it in the machine after you've voted it. If you would like a mail-in ballot, you can go on our website. It's vote.boonemo.org. And we will mail you a ballot after you apply. and you have to apply before May 20th at 5 p.m. So we have to have that application, signed application, from our website, or if you received your sample ballot in the mail, there's an application included in that you can mail back to us, or take a picture and email it back to us. We will mail you out an envelope, a ballot and instructions, and then you'll put your ballot back into the envelope, completely fill out the envelope. It's postage prepaid, and you can mail it back to us. Or if you happen to be downtown for some reason, you can drop it off at our office. It has to be received in our office by 7 p.m. on election night.
Thank you. You mentioned you have to have a reason when you're filling out the form for absentee voting. If someone is concerned about COVID-19, whether they are high risk or are just taking extra precautions, can they state that on their absentee, or how would that work?
So under our current law, there is no exact excuse for this. And so every county has kind of been left to individually come up with a solution for that, or some kind of guidance on that. And some have gone one way and some have gone the other. Counties like St. Francis and St. Charles and St. Louis in some cases have provided this guidance that voters should be encouraged to vote and consider voting absentee if they feel that they are following the CDC recommendations or local public health recommendations. That can be a form of confinement due to illness, which is an excuse in absentee. That could be a reason that voters choose to vote absentee in Boone County as well. So that excuse also is one of the only ones that does not require the ballot to be notarized. That's a question that we get in the office a lot is, once I request my ballot, do I have to have it notarized? If you choose that excuse, then you do not have to have it notarized. All of the other excuses, if you're going to be out of town, or if you are requesting for religious reasons, those do need to be notarized.
Okay. And let's say someone decides to still go vote in person. What are some of the extra precautions being done at the polling sites?
So we've thankfully had a lot of time to prepare for this. We are going to have, when you walk into the polling place, it will look different. It'll look kind of similar to what a lot of the grocery stores have put into place. So we will have plexiglass barriers between the election judges and voters. So when you go up to check in on the poll pad, please use the stylus that's provided. We'll be making sure that that is wiped down between each voter. But you'll be able to check in. The election judge will have a mask and a face mask available that they will be wearing to protect themselves and voters. And then we'll also have social distancing measures, posters that are up to explain social distancing and the 6 feet that we're asking voters to stand apart when they're in line. There'll also be places on the floor where people will stand at 6-foot intervals, and our voting booths themselves will allow 6 feet between voters so that everybody can stay distanced at their polling places. And then we'll have somebody, a poll worker that makes sure that we're cleaning the polling place and the high touch areas that voters are going to be putting down their ballot to vote or checking in, and there'll be hand sanitizer available as well.
Awesome. I don't believe I'm seeing any questions right now. Is there anything that either of you think we haven't covered yet that you really want Boone County residents to know during this time?
For the election, please be sure to go onto our website or check the sample ballot that you received in the mail for your polling place information. One of the changes due to the concerns that have happened with COVID-19 is that we've had some polling places that were unavailable, either due to those concerns or to the rescheduling of it to June 2nd. So be sure to check, because some of them have changed. And we've been very fortunate to be working with Columbia Public Schools and Southern Boone County Schools to utilize their facilities so that voters can go there. But please be sure to make sure that you go to the correct polling place. It may not be the one that you're used to going to, but we will have a total of 38 locations available. Our office, as it always does, will serve as a polling location on election day that anybody can come to and vote, and we'll have social distance measures here as well.
For the census, a couple of questions that we get pretty often, excuse me, is about college students, about how college students should be counted in the census, since many of them went home when this pandemic started and schools shifted online. So the answer is, if they are a student who is living in, say, a dormitory, then the university would count them. They don't need to count themselves. If it's a student who is living off campus, they do need to fill out the census where they were living before this pandemic happened. So at their apartment with their roommates or the house they rented with friends, they need to be counted there at that address. Another question we often get is about safety and security of information. So we do want people to know that any information that they submit about themselves cannot be used against them. So for instance, it can't be shared with immigration officials if someone is worried about citizenship. That is not a question that is on the census. It can't be shared with law enforcement. So if someone has concerns, if they have warrants for their arrest, that information can't be shared. If say there are more people living in a rented home or apartment than are listed on the lease, the information can't be shared with landlords, so they shouldn't be worried about that. They need to count everyone who's living in the house, not who's on the lease. And then finally, that information can't be shared with tax officials or tax agencies. So if someone, say, has back taxes that they haven't paid, they don't need to worry about that. So really the Census Bureau wants to capture information, and that information can't be shared or with anybody outside of that agency that's specific to you. It's used for data purposes only, and it can't be used against you.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us today. We really appreciate all the work you're doing all the time, but especially right now. We will be back next week for another Facebook Live. And until then, we'll see you all soon. Thank you.